Hey everyone, I hope you're doing well. I'm doing fine this morning. I just got my kids to school and it's a beautiful day. The sun is out and I noticed the cherries are ripe on the tree. And it jogged a memory for me that this was actually my first ink that I ever made. And I wanted to share at least the location, a little bit of the vibe, and its story really in terms of this ink is a cherry ink, but it turns out it has a little sad story behind it too, or some sadness in general. I don't mean to belittle it in any way, but when I first moved into this house, a woman came by and said she had lived here before, for 10 or so, like 10 years ago. And she said she planted this tree the day her brother passed away. And that has always stuck with me. I see this tree outside my window and I watch it bloom, these beautiful blooms, and create these beautiful cherries. And now I make ink out of it. And I often reflect on this fact that we plant seeds, we do things, and we can make beautiful things grow even out of painful, now I'm getting all teared up, guys, painful moments. And so, not to bring us down, because we're going to make some lovely ink, but it's back to that idea of connection, paying attention to our environment and thinking about the seeds that we're planting and the fruits that we're working with and where they actually come from. I'm getting all serious, guys. I'm sorry, but I didn't mean to get teary-eyed. But it does bring up those feelings, and I guess being connected and feeling that connection isn't a bad thing. And I think that's one of the benefits of working with natural inks, is feeling that connection with your environment, whatever emotions those may bring. Some of them beautiful, some of them can be painful, some of them jog memories, and here I am talking about a memory that's not even related to me, but it still has meaning and importance because I see it every day. But on that note, I want to go back into the studio. I don't want to end on a down point. I'm very excited to get going on these inks. We will be doing a cherry ink, of course, because it's one of my first inks that I ever made. So I'll see you back in the studio, and looking forward to getting my hands dirty with you all. All right, ciao, ciao, ciao. Hello everyone, welcome back. I have a lot going on here on the table. We're gonna jump in and we're gonna start off making some very simple inks made with very basic ingredients. I know that I talked before about archival inks and the importance of considering how long these inks will last on your paper or your piece of artwork, which of course is really important to consider. The inks that I'm going to present now are probably a little less light fast. They may corrode your paper in a few years' time. They may shift colors in a few months' time, but they're still very beautiful and fun to work with. And they're a fun way to get going and just kind of get to know natural inks in general. They're a fun way an easy way to just get yourself started in this process without a lot of intimidating or materials that you might find intimidating or processes. So, taking a look at the table, we are going to make a very simple ink out of red cabbage. We're also going to take a look at making an ink out of copper, which would be a copper acetate ink. And of course, one of the first inks that I made was the cherry ink. These are from my cherry tree that I just picked just this morning outside. So let's get started. So here we go. Let's see, we're going to be starting out with a red cabbage ink. This creates beautiful tonalities of blues and dark blues and greens. These were made earlier this year. I also have samples from years ago. It does retain a beautiful color, especially if you keep it sealed up, possibly in a notebook, and it's not exposed to too much light. This blue color
is caused by a pigment, a natural occurring pigment called anthocyanins. And they are present in these types of colored vegetables and plants. Let's see, I'm trying to think what else has this blue color. I mean, it'll come to me and I'll come back to it. But I do know that this red cabbage is loaded with it. And so it helps to bring, when we create this ink, it really goes on the paper one color, and then as it dries, it becomes this beautiful blue. Another ink we'll be looking at is the copper acetate ink, which it has been around for, if not hundreds of years, thousands of years in Greece. It originated by them hanging sheets of copper over acidic solution in salt, and where this kind of evaporated and caused this condensation and created this patina, much like many of the copper sculptures that you find in their museums. Their ancient sculptures have this color. They would scrape it off and create this pigment, or not create, but it would already be there. They'd bind it with something and use it as a paint on some of their statues, and it became known as vert de gris, which is kind of this green from Greece. So we'll be making this ink out of a few ingredients, and it creates a beautiful blue color. And lastly, we'll be looking at this cherry ink, which was one of my first inks that I ever made. I just went out, as I said, out to my cherry tree, picked some cherries, and realized that I could just start to get color out of basic things that I remember would stain my shirt. I mean, in practice, you could make a beautiful color on paper with some wine, coffee, or tea. I mean, these are all things to be explored and have fun with. So let's get started. The red cabbage ink is very simple. We start out, and you could do, I could say that there is a recipe like a half a cup of a certain vinegar and a half a cup of this. But really what I always end up doing is just packing a jar full of red cabbage, chopped up bits, just like this. Packing it up, squishing it down. And I use a very clear vinegar. This one is acetate di alcol, which is like a alcohol-based vinegar. I don't know why they call it that. I should probably look into it. But we use it it's just basically a very strong white vinegar. I pour it in, and almost within a few minutes, you can see that the color starts to come out, seep out of these bits. I'll poke it down with a little bit of a spoon. Make sure that it's all covered. You can put a little pinch of salt in there to help some of the juices come out. And yeah, you can already see the pinks are starting to come out of this solution. Now, what happens if you let this sit for a week, and I won't even tell you how long I've let this sit, because it's kind of embarrassing and maybe even scary to some of you. But actually, I'll tell you, this has probably been in my refrigerator for 2 months. It's red cabbage and vinegar and salt. At about the week, at about 7 days, this is going to be a beautiful hot pink fuchsia color. And when you put it down on the paper, it will remain this hot pink. It will take some time to dry. Keep that in mind. But when you come back the next morning, it will be a lovely blue color, possibly blue-green, depending on the pH or the acidity of your paper, if it has sizing or not. It could shift a little bit, but more or less, you're going to have a beautiful blue color when you use it. And again, this can last weeks, if not months, in your refrigerator. I would keep it in your refrigerator. I tend to strain mine after about 2 weeks. But again, I didn't get to this. This was in the back of my fridge, and it's probably sitting there for 2 months. It doesn't go bad, it doesn't mold, and it remains this beautiful color. So yeah, I would probably seal this up with a lid, put it in the refrigerator, and let it sit. That said, also these bits, little tip here, if you use a sterilized jar, if you wash your cabbage first and you pour it in your vinegar, These are delicious on top of a salad. I strain it out after a week or so, and I will eat these mixed in with a little bit of a Asian inspired dish, you could say, or on top of a salad. They just add that, just almost a sauerkraut, basically, and a pickled type thing. They're just, I love it. So bonus there, bonus points with that ink. Which brings me to one of my favorite, just alchemic kind of experiences, creating this blue ink out of copper. What you would want to do if you wanted to make this at home is find copper scraps or copper wire, as I do. I go to the hardware store and I go to the area where they sell wire and I find their copper wire. Again, you could use a recipe and I could tell you the exact amount, but really what I just do is I just fill a glass jar with copper bits or copper wire. I take a stone and I kind of weigh it down with a river rock, make sure it's all pushed down in there, and I will fill this up with vinegar. Again, white vinegar. But let's roll back here a bit, in the sense that this could alter your color depending on what color you want to have as an end result. For example, this made with a clear, just super clear, strong vinegar, you will be able to get a tone that's a very blue, a lovely, just sky blue color. Shaking it a bit, it can cloud up because of the acetate particles at the bottom, the copper acetate, which is this kind of disintegrating verdigris pigment, which is also lovely to paint with. In fact, I'll show you some examples here. I love this ink because it's just fun splotching it on. This is with some berries of an ivy plant. I've dropped in some copper acetate here. This is called broom rape or orabanche, and I dropped a few drops in there. It can be very pale. It can have nice contrast with an avocado ink, and I just love it. Not to mention, when you just have this color sitting on your table and watching it slowly appear after a few weeks' time, it's just really exciting. Back to the vinegar. So we can have this beautiful blue color appear, or if you wanted to use apple cider vinegar, I'm working on my pronunciation there, I'm stumbling on my words, you may get more of a green color. So it really depends on what the base vinegar you start with is. Of course, it depends on your copper scraps. There will be a variation. It won't necessarily come out that bright blue, but I found when I've used copper wire that's clean from the hardware store, added a white wine vinegar, you will get that blue color. But you need patience. This ink, it demands patience. It's not going to happen overnight. So I would pour this in, cover it completely, make sure this rock is kind of weighting everything down, and then loosely cover it with a lid. What you will need to do, though, is keep the lid loosely on, and you will need to shake it probably once a day. Give it a shake for 20-30 seconds. This is going to bring oxygen into the solution, into the jar again. And what we're trying to get this kind of patina action, oxidation process happening. Now, you're going to hear me say oxidization a few times in these sessions. I know it's wrong, and I don't know where I invented that word, but oxidation. So again, it takes time, and you will think this is not happening, it's never going to happen, and then all of a sudden, one day you come in and it starts to turn a beautiful blue. This has been sitting for a few weeks, and it was just a clear color for weeks and weeks and weeks. You may notice that the vinegar level is going down. Top it back up. Some people add a few, like a teaspoon of salt crystals. I might do that as well. Other people say that doesn't make it a pure acetate, a copper acetate ink. It kind of changes what the chemical name for it would be. Sorry, I'm not a chemist. I don't know. But I do know that when you add the salt, that it will create more crystallization in your inks. So if you like that look, you might consider experimenting as well with putting some salt in there and seeing what happens. So again, patience. Think about the vinegar you want to use. More of a yellow vinegar is going to get more of that kind of olive green look. A clear vinegar is going to get more of that bright blue look. And again, one more thing is these two are both vinegar based, an acidic solution that in theory, when you put it on your paper, it will cause corrosion over time. I want to stress that these are not stable inks. They're very beautiful, very fun to work with, but you kind of have to think in terms of impermanence and kind of embrace it in the sense that this is part of the nature of these inks. It's part of our lives. Nothing lasts forever, but enjoy it while you can. The beautiful parts that you see coming forth from these inks, embrace it. It will change, but even that is really beautiful and stunning too. So I am going to get going on this little cherry ink, which essentially I just pitted some cherries, found the darkest ones on the tree. I'm going to add, I'm not going to completely cover them with water. I want this to be a concentrated ink. I want it to be rich and dark with the color. And these cherries are quite juicy too, so they're going to break down and release their own liquid, but just enough so they're not scorching on the bottom of the pan. And I'm going to just put it on the heat and let that cook for a minute. And I just wanted to just talk just a few little tips about natural ink making in your own home. I don't know if I have 10 tips. I was kind of calling them the 10 commandments of ink making, of natural ink making, but I won't go that far because I'm not even sure if I have 10 right now. But one of the first ones I would suggest is this idea of look before you cook. And that means basically, if you're out in the wild and you're collecting your ingredients in nature, be sure you know what you're looking at before you cut it and take it home and throw it in a pan and start cooking it. I would suggest getting a floral guide or downloading an app that it identifies flowers and plants and branches, just to have a better idea about what you're dealing with in terms of toxicity, in terms of risk, in terms of irritation, even of your skin of touching the plant. I have made that mistake before. I will say in the beginning, I would get very excited and I would cut a little of this, bring home a little mushroom, bring home a little piece of that, mix it all together, and probably I could have been a little bit more careful. So I'm just saying from the beginning, it might be a good idea, or it definitely is a good idea. Let me rephrase that. It is definitely a good idea to know what you're looking at before you cook. So just think of these words a little bit. I thought of this phrase, look before you cook. Look it up online, look it up in a book. Be sure you know what you're working with before you start cooking it. When I start out making an ink, I also go light, as I said, on the liquid. I like my inks as intense a color as I can produce. So I try not to just dump a bunch of water in there because I know that it could take a lot of time to reduce that. I keep my eye on that level. Let's just put it that way. Because it's hard to pull it back once you put it in. So starting light on the actual vehicle, whether that's water, or vinegar, or some people even use oil or alcohol to create inks. I just try to go a little bit light as possible, or as less as possible, just to create an ink that's going to have a more intense color. That said, I also, if I'm going to add something to this, such as when you're making an avocado ink and you're adding soda ash, I try to add a small amounts of that as well, little by little, instead of just dumping a bunch in. Again, you can't take it back. It's kind of like cooking and putting in too much salt. Then you have too much salt in there and it tastes terrible. So it's better to think less is more in this sense when you're first starting out. Always have a pen, get ready for some note taking when you're doing some swatching, trying to remember what you did, even some basic things, the date, and a few of the key ingredients that are in there. It doesn't have to be exact. Oh, I put in 220 grams of this. It can be. That would be spectacular. It can be just be, I put cherries and waters and a half a teaspoon of salt in this, and we're going to see what happens. And this is what it looks like. But some type of note taking, I would really recommend, especially long term, if you want to see, oh, this shifted over 6 months. Okay, this is what this looked like last year. Let's see what it looked like 2 years ago. It's nice to have these records of the time. And it's a record of your experience in that moment as well. And then I would just say be ready to have some type of strainer on hand, a gauze. It does help in terms of preserving the inks, which again, you will probably want to sterilize some of the jars that are containing liquids of fresh fruits or vegetables. And in terms of preservation, also, I don't have an example here, but we all know what more or less a fresh clove is, or a dried clove. Those can be very good for helping fight bacteria. Mold can be a problem with these inks. Don't let that put you off, though, because you scrape it off, put it in the garbage, and the ink more or less is still okay. I keep mine in the refrigerator because, or at least most of them, I keep in the refrigerator. If there's space, it tends to keep the mold growth down. So there's a few ways you can think about preservation, but it is something you want to think about before you get started. So you have a little bit of a game plan when you have an ink ready and you're like, oh, I need to strain this and I need a bottle. There's just some basic things like that to consider before you jump in and get cooking. So our cherries are kind of bubbling away here. I don't know if it's 100% necessary, but in this case, I will add a little pinch of salt in there. I think of it as a little bit of a mordant, something that's going to help it attach to the cotton paper, much like a dye. When you may add a little bit of salt to a dye to help it stick to or retain its color on a fabric. So half a teaspoon or a few pinches of salt. Again, these don't have strict rules or recipes. I just wanted to present something to you that you felt you could get to the kitchen or into your workspace and start making a few inks almost immediately with a few basic ingredients. So these cherries have been cooking, or cherries and salt mixture, they've been cooking for about 10 minutes. The juice has been released. I could probably cook them down a little bit, but I'm also fine just to test them right now and see how the color is looking. I've poured off some of this cabbage into a smaller jar because it was just kind of cumbersome like that. And I was going to use a paper towel and this funnel. And I didn't have any coffee filters on hand. You could also use those, but even just a paper towel can work sometimes. Let's see if we can get some of this to pour through. While that's filtering, I might just do a few swatches. My hands are already kind of stained here from the juices. This is the red cabbage. I'm going to put a few swatches down. Again, you won't want to use your favorite brush unless your favorite brush is a really raggedy, jaggedy brush. And that actually is my case. I like my brushes a little bit destroyed, so this kind of works out. But being that it is such an acidic ink, it can really eat through the fiber. So you do have to be cautious if you don't want to throw your best brush under the bus, that is to say, because they will get destroyed if they're in this kind of acidic solution. So yeah, just to play around and see what kind of combinations you can get. You might want to drop in a little of the blue copper acetate. Again, this is the red cabbage. Sometimes I like to add a few salt granules and just see what that will do. Or maybe I'll try a more, just kind of a more greener, slushier color. Maybe from the apple cider vinegar, has more of a green hue to it. Another thing about it, I don't have a demo for this, but essentially this is fresh turmeric that I've grated and soaked in alcohol and strained it through a coffee filter, I think this was. I added a few cloves to it, and it does make this incredible yellow, very staining on the hands or any surface, but we've managed to get it off somewhere. I'll tell you a little secret. Today I was cleaning this off of my countertop, and I was using a spray bottle that had ammonia in it. And I'm just going to give it a little splurge here, and we're going to take a look. Oh gosh, I probably should move a few things. This is going to get really messy and kind of crazy. Move this out of the way. Put this back. So I was cleaning. I had this spray bottle out. I was cleaning the counter, and I just, and I accidentally got some on the turmeric and this vinegar and this solution of the red cabbage. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. Kind of interesting happening here with, this is maybe reacting with the turmeric, maybe the alcohol. The red cabbage is getting some flakes in there as well. But it got me thinking. So I looked at the ingredients. Again, like I said, I noticed that the main ingredient in this was ammonia. And I have never really played around with that, but I was curious to see what that might do as a modifier, as something that can shift the pH of your liquid. Those got a little bubbly, but I really like this kind of speckled effect. And I don't feel, I know many people were like, oh, why are you spraying it with ammonia or using bleach or these things that you shouldn't mix? But this is the way I do it. I just kind of look, and accidents happen, and I find these strange results happening. I'm not a chemist. I'm not exactly sure why that happened, but it is fun to experiment. Again, I will go open the windows because you never know what kind of fumes this could create in this moment. So I'll be right back. This is still filtering through here. It's taking a little bit of time. But I might just take my brush in there and get in there. Usually I make a template, as I've explained in the natural ink session that I did, with a little circle on it. I try and make it kind of uniform with my testing, but today it was just kind of felt good to just have fun and experiment just with some slightly looser just forms. This is the black cherry juice. This will take a little while to seep in. I'm just going to let it sit there for a minute and write down at least what I'm starting with as the base, so I can remember. It's very gelled up sometimes, the copper acetate. Try the liquid blue on top here. I know this turmeric is not my color palette. It's not something I particularly like, but it's something very satisfying about seeing them drop and mix all together. And honestly, I need to find a smaller spritzer bottle, but gosh, I'm going to just step back. That was a lighter mist of this ammonia solution. I like how it creates the little speckles in there. If I did that with red cabbage and salt. Again, I'm going to push this back, giving one little. If I spritz it from far away, it really makes this nice little speckled look. Now, if I were to just drop an ammonia, this is pure ammonia in there. Just bringing out this red, which is really interesting. And on the red cabbage, it's turning blue. Oh, I'm really liking these salt blooms come out on the red cabbage. There's a little bit of the copper acetate in there too. So these have been drying for almost an hour and a half. They're still not dried, and it's quite a warm day here. The fact that a lot of them, these have, for example, the cabbage and the copper acetate are a vinegar-based ink. They could take hours and maybe even overnight to dry. But I do like some of these results. I love how the red cabbage does slowly fade into this purplish greenish blue. The copper acetates look nice. These are a few different colors, a greenish one and then the more clear blue one that has been dropped on over the top. And I just think that's just such a lovely color. The black cherry is going to fade and become more bluish. It's still quite pink right now, but it will shift towards the purples and blues. Let's see, and even the turmeric. I don't know. I just like how these little splots of ammonia solution went onto it and caused this kind of red dotting to happen, even spotting and speckling in the red cabbage. There's something to work with there. Let's see. I dropped in some ammonia here. It kind of bled into a greenish red with the red cabbage. But it's basically just to show you some nice color you can pull from some simple ingredients, and to inspire you to have fun playing, maybe not with your exact color palette that you love, but just seeing what can come from different combinations of using plants, food scraps, and even mundane materials as copper scraps. Can create some really beautiful and interesting effects. And I hope you enjoyed it. And I'll see you again soon.